Hello everyone, welcome back on Meds. I'm your host, Mr. Meds, aka King Meds. So today I will be tackling a very important topic, a topic of law and regulations governing the pharmacy practice. I know most of you just think you can just go into a pharmacy or dispensary and get anything you want without any restrictions or limitations. Unfortunately, that's not the case. There are laws, rules, and regulations governing the pharmacy practice. And you need to know all these laws and regulations to understand why pharmacies operate the way they operate. Why you're able to get some medication over the counter and some only on prescription. It's all because of the laws and regulations we'll be discussing today. So medicine can help to improve your health if taken correctly, but if not taken correctly, then it can have the worst implication in your health or body. In fact, you have higher chances of being killed by the medication you're using if you use it incorrectly than being killed by the condition you're suffering from. If you don't know much about medication, there is a very thin line between treating yourself and poisoning yourself. So it is important to have laws and regulations protecting the public from them. There are different laws and regulations governing the pharmacy, and it is important for the public to understand them because these laws and regulations are put in place to protect the public. I will go through all these laws and regulations to explain to you what their purpose is in the dispensary and how do they affect you as a customer or consumer. So today we will be discussing the three most important laws in the dispensary. It doesn't mean that there are no other laws that are governing the pharmacy, the dispensary or the pharmacy. There are other laws, but I just want us to tackle the three most important laws that are governing the pharmacy or dispensary. So the first one will be the Pharmacy Act, and the second one is going to be the Medicines Act, and then the last one is going to be the POPI Act. So please be patient with me. This might be a very long video because there is a lot to discuss. Without wasting your time, let's start with the Pharmacy Act. So this is one of the most important acts in the dispensary. The Pharmacy Act was introduced in 1974 and it was named the Pharmacy Act 53 of 1974. I have referred to this act several times in my previous video. This is because this is like the main act in the dispensary. So without wasting any time, let's start with the Pharmacy Act. So this is one of the most important acts in the pharmacy. The Pharmacy Act was introduced in 1974 and it was named the Pharmacy Act 53 of 1974. I have referred to this act several times in my previous video. This is because this is one of the most important acts for the pharmacy professionals. Without this act, the pharmacy profession would cease to exist. The purpose of this act was to regulate the pharmacy practice and protect the public. To guard this act, the Pharmacy Act introduced a statutory body called the South African Pharmacy Council, SAPC in short. The section 2 of the Pharmacy Act says there is hereby established a jurisdiction person to be known as the South African Pharmacy Council, which shall be deemed to be a successor in title of the Interim Pharmacy Council of South Africa. So this means the Pharmacy Act gave birth to the South African Pharmacy Council, which is our regulatory authority. So we cannot talk about the Pharmacy Act without talking about the South African Pharmacy Council. Now I want us to talk about the South African Pharmacy Council a bit, because once you understand the South African Pharmacy Council, it will be easier for you to understand the Pharmacy Act. I've already explained to you how the South African Pharmacy Council came to be, but I just want us to quickly explain the role of the South African Pharmacy Council. I know sometimes I do a lot of reading, but I just want you guys to see that whatever I'm saying or talking about is not something that I'm just making up. There are laws that I have to refer to, so I want you to see those laws so that if you want to, then you can go and check them yourselves. So now I'm just gonna discuss section 3 of the Pharmacy Act, the objective of the council. So the object of the council shall be A, to assist in the promotion of health of the population of the Republic. So South African Pharmacy Council basically involved in health promotion. So to advise the minister or any other person or on any matter relating to pharmacy. So there is one example I talked about on my previous video, the decision of removal of the pharmacy assistant education and training and being replaced by the pharmacy technician training. So the South African Pharmacy Council was involved in that decision making. So, and then C, to promote the provision of pharmaceutical care which complies with universal norms and values in both public and private sector, with the goal of achieving definite therapeutic outcomes for the health and quality of life of a patient. So this is to make sure that the pharmaceutical service offered in both public and private sector is up to acceptable standards. And D, to upload and safeguard the rights of the general public to universally acceptable standards of pharmacy practice in both the public and the private sector. So this is to protect the public and make sure their rights are protected and avoid exploitation. And E, to establish, develop, maintain, control universally acceptable standards of 1, pharmaceutical education and training. So all institutions that offer pharmacy-related education and training must be registered with the South African Pharmacy Council. So this is to make sure that they have control over education that is offered within the country and it is up to acceptable standards. And then number 2, for the registration of a person who provide one or more or all of the services which form part of the scope of practice of the category in which such person is registered. So the South African Pharmacy Council is responsible for registration of people or institutions offering pharmaceutical services. You cannot practice or you cannot offer any services if you are not registered with South African Pharmacy Council. Even institutions that offer pharmaceutical services has to be registered with the Pharmacy Council. Of practice of various categories of persons required to be registered in terms of this Act. So to keep record and control of everyone practicing under this Act. Number 4, of professional conduct required of person to register in terms of this Act. So this is to make sure that professional practice pharmacy according to the acceptable standards. And then number 5, of control over a person registered in terms of this Act by investigating in accordance with this Act, complies or accusation related to the conduct of the registered personnel. So this is to make sure that people that provide these services are qualified and there is accountability. So the South African Pharmacy Council has the right to investigate and discipline any professional registered under this Act. And F, subsection F, to be transparent to the profession and the general public in achieving its objective and in performing its function and executing its powers. So this is why the South African Pharmacy Council has a public website where the public can access any information they want relating to pharmacy. So this is to make sure that they are transparent to the public. And G, to maintain and enhance the dignity of the pharmacy profession and the integrity of the person practicing it. So this is to make sure that the public respect and trust the pharmacy profession. As you can see from the objective that I've just read, the role of the South African Pharmacy Council is not to protect the some pharmacy professionals. So everything the Act does, or the South African Pharmacy Council does, they do so to protect the public, not the professionals. So then there are further rules and regulations that are established by the South African Pharmacy Council, which further explain and enforce this law. One example is the good pharmacy practice, and the other one is the good manufacturing practice. The good pharmacy practice is actually one of the most important documents in the dispensary that has been complied by the South African Pharmacy Council to enforce the Pharmacy Act. When you get into a pharmacy, the arrangement of the dispensary is according to the good pharmacy practice. So it states how the pharmacy should look and maintain, and how pharmacy professionals should carry themselves. The South African Pharmacy Council have to occasionally visit the pharmacy for inspection. If there is anything that goes against the Pharmacy Act or the good pharmacy practice, the pharmacy grade might be lowered, or in the worst case scenario, the pharmacy operating license might be seized. So guys, it is important for pharmacies to practice according to this act, otherwise they might be shut down because they do not meet the acceptable standards. If an individual is found if the individual breaks this law or this act, then they might be removed from the register. Let's make one example that might lead to a pharmacy being downgraded. One example that keeps on coming to my mind is example of a fridge. So according to the good pharmacy practice, the fridge temperature must be monitored and maintained between 2 to 8 degrees Celsius. It must have a backup in case of a power cut. The fridge must also have an alarm reporting to the responsible pharmacist, and the temperatures must be recorded at least twice a day. If during inspection the pharmacy fails to meet any of these requirements, then the pharmacy fails the inspection and the grade might be lowered. A case where a professional might lose their practicing license is when a professional practice in a scope of practice that's not theirs. For example, if a basic pharmacist assistant practices under a scope of practice of a post-basic pharmacist assistant, they might lose their license. So you must understand that these laws are put in place to protect you, not the pharmacy professionals. I think this video is going to be too long, so I will stop here now on part 1. We'll continue with part 2 on our next video. I don't want to make the videos too long, they end up being boring. So let's stop here for now. I'll continue with part 2 on my next video. See you in the next one.